My own sister, the one I'd protected my entire life, stole everything from me. But she learned, the hard way, that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. And some debts, no matter how long it takes, are always paid. Looking back now, I can see the subtle shifts, the tiny cracks appearing in the foundation of what I thought was an unbreakable bond. My name is Sarah, and for 32 years I believed my sister, Emily, was my other half. We shared a bedroom, secrets whispered into the darkness, dreams of a future we'd conquer together. She was 2 years younger, and from the moment she was born, I felt an almost primal need to shield her. When she fell and scraped her knee, I was there. When the school bullies targeted her, I was her fierce defender. When our parents argued, we'd huddle together, two small figures against the world, promising each other we'd always have each other's backs. Our childhood wasn't perfect. Whose is? But it was ours. Filled with the scent of pine needles from our Christmas tree, the taste of homemade cookies, the sound of our laughter echoing through the house. Emily was always the more impulsive one, the one who took risks, who pushed boundaries. I was the cautious, steady older sister, often picking up the pieces when her grand schemes inevitably, spectacularly, failed. I didn't mind, it was just what I did. What sisters did. Or so I thought. Our parents, bless their hearts, were hard-working people. They instilled in us a strong sense of family, of loyalty. They didn't have much to give us financially, but they gave us everything else. Love, support, a belief that with enough effort, we could achieve anything. When I decided to go to college, they scraped every penny together, took out loans they could barely afford, just to see me get that education. Emily, meanwhile, explored her artistic side, preferring drawing and painting to textbooks and lectures. I encouraged her, bought her supplies, told her she had a real talent. I truly believed in her. After I graduated, I started working. Hard. Long hours, entry-level pay, the whole grind. My goal was always clear: to get established, to build a future, not just for myself, but for us, for our family. I wanted to help our parents, to ensure Emily never had to struggle the way I had. I envisioned us, years down the line, both successful in our own ways, raising our families, still having those shared Christmases, still laughing at old memories. It was a beautiful picture, a comforting dream I held close. Then came David. He walked into my life like a force of nature, charming, intelligent, kind. We met through work, a chance encounter that quickly blossomed into something real, something deep. I fell in love with him, completely, utterly. He saw me, truly saw me, beyond the responsibilities, beyond the older sister role. He saw Sarah, the woman who dreamed, who loved fiercely, who deserved happiness. We built a life together, slowly, carefully. We bought a small house, nothing grand, but it was ours. We painted the walls together, picked out furniture, planted a small garden. Every step felt like a step towards a shared future. A future overflowing with love and laughter. Emily was, of course, a part of that future. She was my maid of honor, standing by my side on the happiest day of my life. She cried, genuine tears, as I walked down the aisle. She hugged David, welcoming him into our family with open arms, or so it seemed. I remember looking at her that day, seeing her smiling face, and feeling a profound sense of completeness. My husband, my sister, my family, everything felt perfect. I had no idea the serpent was already in the garden. The first hint of trouble, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor, came a few months after the wedding. Emily had been struggling financially. Her art wasn't quite paying the bills, and she was bouncing between part-time jobs. David, ever generous, offered her a position at his company. It was a good role, an administrative assistant, offering stability and a decent salary. I thought it was wonderful, a chance for them to bond, for Emily to finally find her footing. I even joked about them becoming work buddies. They both laughed. I trusted them. I trusted David implicitly. I trusted Emily because she was my sister, my blood. The idea of betrayal, especially from her, was so foreign, so utterly unthinkable, it simply never entered my mind. So I welcomed Emily into our lives even more. She started coming over frequently, for dinner, for movie nights. She and David seemed to get along famously, discussing work, joking about office politics. I saw it as a good sign, a strengthening of family ties. I was happy, blissfully, catastrophically unaware. The changes were insidious, gradual. David started coming home a little later, often citing late meetings with Emily. They'd exchange glances that I now recognize as conspiratorial, but at the time, I dismissed them as inside jokes from the office. Emily started dressing differently, more polished, more confident. She'd always ask David's opinion on her outfits, a habit I found a little odd, but again, I brushed it off. "She looks up to you," I told David. "She values your opinion." He'd just smile, that charming smile that used to make my heart flutter. Now, the memory of it makes my stomach churn. My intuition, a quiet whisper I'd learned to trust over the years, began to stir. There were moments, fleeting glances, hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. A strange tension in the air when all three of us were together. I felt it, a cold prickle on the back of my neck, but I fought against it. No, not Emily, not David. It was impossible. My mind refused to entertain such a monstrous thought. One evening David was working late again. I was scrolling through social media, a mundane evening, when I saw it. A photo, innocently posted by a mutual friend from his office. It was a group shot, a team dinner after a successful project, and there, in the center, laughing, their shoulders brushing, was David and Emily. Too close, too comfortable. Her hand was resting on his arm, not in a friendly way, but in a way that screamed intimacy, and the caption beneath it, from the friend, "Our dynamic duo, celebrating another win." A cold dread spread through me, chilling me to the bone. It wasn't just the photo, it was the way they looked at each other, the unguarded affection in their eyes. It was the sudden, undeniable realization that my gut had been screaming at me for weeks, and I had been willfully deaf. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs, feeling as though the air had been sucked out of the room. This wasn't a late meeting. This wasn't office bonding. This was something far, far darker. I confronted David that night, my voice trembling, the photo clutched in my hand. He denied everything, of course. Accused me of being jealous, of overthinking, of imagining things. He painted me as the hysterical wife, irrational and untrusting. And then, the ultimate gaslighting, he brought Emily into it. "How could you even think that about your own sister, Sarah? She's family," he said, his voice laced with feigned hurt. And for a moment I almost believed him. That's how good they were. That's how deep the manipulation ran. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow, twisting and turning inside me, poisoning every memory, every shared laugh, every tender touch. I started watching them, truly watching. And the more I watched, the more the pieces clicked into place, forming a horrific mosaic of deceit. The lingering looks, the hushed phone calls, the sudden trips for work that coincided perfectly with Emily's vague plans. My world, once so solid, began to crumble around me. The woman I loved, the sister I adored, both conspiring against me, right under my own roof. The pain was excruciating, a physical ache that settled deep in my chest. It wasn't just betrayal, it was an annihilation of everything I believed in. One afternoon I found a discarded receipt in David's car. It was for a romantic dinner at an expensive restaurant, a place he'd taken me only once, for our anniversary. The date on the receipt was a night he was supposedly working late. My hands shook as I called the restaurant. "Did David Miller have a reservation on the 15th? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes," the hostess replied cheerfully. "Mr. Miller and his wife, Emily." My world shattered. The sound of the phone hitting the floor was deafening in the sudden silence of my car. "Wife, Emily." The words echoed in my mind, a cruel, mocking refrain. It wasn't just an affair, it was a deliberate, calculated, months-long deception. And Emily, my sister, my blood, was not just complicit, she was an active participant in dismantling my life. I drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring through my tears. My chest felt hollow, like an empty cavern where my heart used to be. The love, the trust, the future I'd so carefully built, all reduced to ashes by the two people I cherished most. I walked into that house, the house we had painted together, the house filled with what I thought were happy memories, and it felt like a tomb. I didn't confront them immediately. The shock was too profound, the pain too raw. I needed to breathe, to process, to understand. I retreated into myself, feigning a headache, a cold, anything to avoid their treacherous gaze. Inside, a storm raged: grief, blinding anger, a sickening sense of nausea, and beneath it all, a cold, hard ember of something else began to glow: revenge. I stayed quiet on the outside, but inside I was already preparing. I started gathering evidence, methodically, dispassionately. Text messages I'd previously dismissed as innocent, now reread with a new, horrifying clarity. Emails, old photos, banking statements. I started tracking David's movements, noting discrepancies. I created a separate folder on my laptop, a digital vault of their betrayal. Each piece of evidence a fresh stab to my heart, but also a new weapon in my arsenal. I remember one night sitting alone in the dark, watching them laugh together from a distance, playing some board game in the living room. Their easy camaraderie, their shared smiles, the way Emily would touch his arm playfully. It twisted something inside me. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the brazen disrespect, the casual cruelty, the utter disregard for my feelings, for our shared history. They thought they were so clever, so subtle. They thought they had gotten away with it. They were wrong. The thought of revenge at first was a fleeting dark fantasy, but as the days turned into weeks and their deception continued to unfold before my eyes, it solidified into a concrete plan. I wasn't going to just leave. I wasn't going to just get divorced. I was going to make sure they both understood the true cost of their actions. I wanted justice, not just for myself, but for the innocent, trusting Sarah, who had been so carelessly discarded. I meticulously researched my options: divorce laws, property rights, company policies. David was a senior executive, well respected in his field. Emily was just starting out, but her position at his company gave her access, a certain level of trust. I began to see their vulnerabilities, the pressure points I could exploit. It wasn't about destroying them utterly, not at first. It was about dismantling their carefully constructed world, piece by piece, just as they had dismantled mine. My first target was David's reputation. He prided himself on his integrity, his ethical standing. It was a cornerstone of his career. I knew, from casual conversations, that he was particularly sensitive about any hint of scandal. I also knew that his company had a strict policy against workplace relationships, especially between a senior executive and a subordinate. It was a clear violation, but simply reporting it wouldn't be enough. I needed proof. Irrefutable, undeniable proof that would force their hand. I began observing their work habits, their routines. I noticed that David often left his laptop unattended when he stepped out for coffee or to take a call. He was usually meticulous, but complacency had set in, born from his belief that I was too naive to ever suspect. I also knew his password, a detail he had ironically shared with me years ago, a testament to our supposed intimacy. The opportunity came on a Friday afternoon. David had a sudden, urgent meeting, and he rushed out, leaving his laptop open on his desk, heading towards the conference room. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. I casually walked past his office, glanced inside. Empty. I slipped in, my movements precise, economical. My fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through his files. I wasn't looking for anything overtly incriminating, not yet. I was looking for patterns, for connections, and I found them. Emails between him and Emily, disguised as work-related correspondence, but with subtle undertones, suggestive remarks, plans for late nights that weren't about work at all. I downloaded them, carefully, onto a secure drive I'd prepared. I also found expense reports, detailing dinners and lavish gifts, coded as client entertainment, but clearly meant for Emily. One particular receipt stood out: an expensive piece of jewelry, purchased on Emily's birthday, well before our own anniversary. He had spent more on her, a casual gesture, than he had on me, his wife, for a milestone event. The insult burned hotter than any betrayal. I also discovered something more significant, something that truly opened my eyes to David's character. He was subtly siphoning company resources, small, almost undetectable amounts, to fund personal projects. Nothing massive, nothing that would immediately trigger an audit, but enough to constitute a serious breach of trust and company policy. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about a man who believed he was above the rules, above reproach, and was willing to exploit anyone, anything, to get what he wanted. He was a fraud, through and through. The next few weeks were a blur of calculated moves. I continued to play the role of the unsuspecting wife, enduring their knowing glances, their hushed conversations, their forced smiles. Each interaction was a performance, a painful charade that fueled my resolve. I wanted them to feel secure, to believe they had won, before I pulled the rug out from under their feet. I contacted a trusted lawyer, explaining the situation in vague terms at first, then laying out the full scope of the betrayal and the evidence I had collected. The lawyer, a sharp, experienced woman named Elizabeth, listened intently, her expression grim. "Sarah," she said, "this is not just about a divorce. This is about professional misconduct and, potentially, fraud." I then initiated the divorce proceedings. I didn't just file for a standard separation. I laid out every single piece of evidence I had against David, detailing his infidelity, his financial improprieties, his ethical breaches. I requested a full investigation into his professional conduct, knowing that such an inquiry would inevitably lead back to his affair with Emily, thereby exposing her complicity. The news hit David like a tidal wave. He was blindsided. He had expected a quiet divorce, perhaps some anger, but certainly not this systematic dismantling of his career and reputation. He tried to fight back, to discredit me, to paint me as an embittered ex-wife. But my evidence was too strong, too meticulously gathered. He had no defense. The company launched an internal investigation. They couldn't ignore the clear evidence of policy violations and potential fraud. The emails, the expense reports, the testimony of employees I had discreetly approached, all pointed directly to David's culpability. The scandal spread quickly through the office, then beyond, whispers turning into murmurs, then into full-blown accusations, and Emily, oh Emily, her world too began to unravel. When the investigation started, she was immediately implicated. Her name appeared on the expense reports, in the incriminating emails. The dynamic duo became the subject of intense scrutiny, then ridicule. She was questioned, her alibis crumbling under the weight of the evidence. The cozy, upward trajectory she thought she was on, fueled by her deceit, suddenly reversed course, plummeting downwards. The climax of my revenge came not in a single dramatic confrontation, but in a series of carefully orchestrated events that culminated in their public downfall. David, facing overwhelming evidence and the threat of legal action, was forced to resign from his prestigious position. It wasn't just a resignation, it was a public shaming. His reputation, once spotless, was irrevocably tarnished. The industry, a close-knit community, quickly blacklisted him. His network dissolved. The man who had prided himself on his integrity was exposed as a cheat and a fraud. As for Emily, her fate was even more humiliating. She was fired from the company, not just for her involvement in David's ethical breaches, but for violating company policy regarding workplace relationships. The dismissal was swift, public, and utterly devastating to her nascent career. Her artistic dreams, which had always been a struggle, now seemed utterly unattainable. No one in the industry wanted to touch her. She was branded, publicly, as the sister who betrayed her own flesh and blood, the woman who helped destroy her sister's marriage and husband's career. I remember seeing her after everything came crashing down. She looked utterly broken, hollow-eyed and pale. She tried to approach me once, months later in a grocery store. Her eyes were full of unshed tears, her face etched with regret. She started to speak, to offer some pathetic apology, but I simply walked past her, my gaze unwavering, as if she were a ghost. The silence spoke volumes. There was nothing left to say. The bridge was burned, the connection severed forever. The aftermath was complicated. There was no triumphant feeling, no joyous celebration of their downfall. Instead, there was a quiet, almost melancholic satisfaction. Justice had been served, yes, but the cost was immense. I had lost my husband, my sister, and a significant piece of my own innocence. The girl who believed in unbreakable bonds, who trusted without question, was gone. The divorce was finalized, and I walked away with the house, a significant financial settlement, and my dignity. David was left with nothing but his ruined reputation and a mountain of legal bills. Emily was left with no job, no prospects, and the bitter taste of public humiliation. Their lives, once so intertwined in their deceit, were now utterly shattered, isolated, and irrevocably damaged. In the quiet moments, I sometimes reflected on Emily, the sister I had loved, protected, nurtured. How could she have done it? Was it jealousy? Greed? A desperate need to be seen, to finally step out of my shadow, even if it meant destroying me in the process? I may never truly know, and perhaps I don't want to. Some wounds are too deep to ever fully heal, and some questions are better left unanswered. I learned a profound lesson from this ordeal. Trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to mend. And while forgiveness is often touted as the path to healing, sometimes justice, swift and uncompromising, is the only way to reclaim your power, to affirm your worth, and to ensure that those who seek to destroy you pay a price. My life now is different. I'm stronger, more resilient. I've rebuilt my world, brick by painful brick. I've learned to trust myself again, to listen to that quiet whisper of intuition, to protect my heart fiercely. The scar remains, a permanent reminder of the betrayal, but it no longer defines me. It is a testament to what I survived, what I overcame, and sometimes, just sometimes, in the quiet solitude of my new peaceful life, I allow myself to smile. Not a smile of triumph, but a smile of quiet, hard-won peace. A peace born from the understanding that even in the darkest corners of betrayal, the light of justice, however painful to ignite, can eventually shine through. And that, in the end, is enough.